Today, President Trump holds his first meeting with a foreign leader since taking office, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu.
The two leaders will be talking about critical issues affecting Israel as well as the Middle East. CBN's Chris Mitchell brings us this look at what's on the agenda.
The ceasefire and hostage release deal between Hamas and Israel will be a main topic for the two leaders. Before reporters in the Oval Office, President Trump said he's not sure the ceasefire with Hamas will hold up.
I have no assurances that it'll hold. I mean, I've seen people brutalized. Nobody's ever seen anything like it. No, I have no guarantees that the peace is going to hold.
The president asked his Middle East envoy, Steve Witkoff, about the deal.
It's holding so far. So we're certainly hopeful, and that's the president's direction. Get the hostages out, save lives, and come to hopefully a peaceful settlement of it all. So far it's holding.
Some Israelis are hopeful with President Trump in office. It might be an opportune time to declare sovereignty over Israel's biblical heartland in the area known as the West Bank. Asked if he supported Israel annexing that region, Trump said he wouldn't talk about that, while explaining how the Jewish state is a tiny nation in the region.
It's a small country in terms of land. See this pen, this wonderful pen? My desk is the Middle East. And this pen, the top of the pen, that's Israel. That's not good, right? You know, that's a pretty big difference.
Trump has repeatedly advocated for Palestinians in Gaza to be relocated to Egypt, Jordan, or other countries, either temporarily or permanently, while Gaza is rebuilt, an idea Arab nations are rejecting. Trump will also view the 47-minute raw video of Hamas's massacre on October 7th. The Prime Minister's office announced Netanyahu will extend his trip through Saturday because of the many requests for meetings. Monday night, he met with Christian leaders in a meeting hosted by Governor Mike Huckabee, who, if confirmed, will be the next U.S. ambassador to Israel. House Speaker Mike Johnson also announced Netanyahu will meet with congressional leaders, who stated, "We need to be supporting Israel right now as strongly as ever." And Politico reports Trump is set to sign an executive order defunding the United Nations Relief and Works Agency, UNRWA. And the Wall Street Journal says the White House has asked congressional leaders to approve a $1 billion military aid package to Israel, including 1,000-pound bombs and heavy equipment. Meanwhile, a Palestinian terror attack today at an Israeli base left a number of injured. It comes as IDF forces are engaged in an operation called Iron Wall to rid terror groups inside Palestinian cities like Jenin and Nablus. And in the aftermath of the war with Hamas, a new poll shows 71% of Israelis oppose the establishment of a Palestinian state in Judea and Samaria, while 68% support declaring sovereignty there. And one issue the two leaders are certain to discuss is Iran. The New York Times reports new intelligence reveals Iran is looking to accelerate the timeline for producing a nuclear weapon.
Well, Chris Mitchell is with us now from Jerusalem. So, Chris, I've got to call it for how I see it. It doesn't look like an even deal where Israel is releasing Palestinian prisoners and there seems to be a very unequal exchange. Well, who are these prisoners? And I understand their families have been getting paid on the pay-to-slay policy.
They're making a lot of money, actually, Gordon, and that's what a lot of people here in Israel are talking about. The deal, the release of the Palestinian prisoners is what they dread, up to maybe almost 2,000 for 33 hostages. They understand what happened in 2011, for example. More than 1,000 terrorists were exchanged for one IDF soldier. His name was Gilad Shalit. 82% of them returned to terrorism, including Yahya Sinwar, who became the head of Hamas in Gaza. This time, Gordon, it's men like Wael Qassam who's being released. He's serving 35 life sentences. Just a few blocks away from our bureau is a place called the Moment Cafe. It's been turned into an apartment complex now. But in 2002, that was an attack, and he's responsible for 35 Israelis being murdered. Another one, Ammar El-Zabin, he's serving 32 life sentences. He planned several bombings, including at Jerusalem's open-air market. So these are dozens of men who had murdered Israelis are being set free. And the payments you mentioned about are staggering. The Palestinian Media Watch documented those payments, more than $140 million to over 700 terrorists. And that's all part of the so-called pay-to-slay policy.
Well, I just find I'm staggered by this. It just doesn't make any sense to me that you would release someone who has that propensity to violence and clearly planned and carried it out, and then clearly was rewarded by the Palestinian Authority. Underlying all of this is negotiations with Hamas. Does that, by definition, leave Hamas in charge of Gaza if the ceasefire holds?
Well, it does so far. In case of phase one, which ends in about 3 weeks, then we go to phase two, which actually negotiations started yesterday. Now, phase two would be the idea that they could actually end the war with Hamas in control. That's why the meeting today with President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu is so important, and what they decide of how to proceed. Now, the goal for everyone here at Israel, and I'm sure the U.S. as well, let's get all of the hostages out. But what price will that happen? And will it mean the end of the war? And for the many families here at Israel of those who have fallen in Gaza, the men and women, will their sacrifice be in vain? So there's really a dilemma going on right now. And if they go to phase two and the war ends with Hamas in control, that really does make the ends of the goals of the war non-existent for Israel. That's why what's going on today is really so pivotal, why people need to be praying for this meeting today.
What's the opinion within Israeli society? Are they in favor of the ceasefire? I know they're in favor of the return of the hostages, but do they see this the way I'm seeing it right now, that it's just an incredibly unequal deal, and at the end of it, it means Hamas survives in Gaza?
I don't think I've talked to one Israeli, Gordon, that's really said it was a good deal. In fact, I had somebody in my office just an hour or so ago, and he was saying right now Israelis have tears of joy in one eye, tears of grief in the other. They're going through waves of emotion from euphoria to trauma. The euphoria, certainly when they see these hostages being released, but also the trauma when even today, just a few hours ago, there was a terror attack on an IDF base. 2 of those soldiers have actually died since our report. Shredded is a word I'm hearing about, deeply conflicted. They've gone through 16 months of war, jubilant over the release of the hostages, but every release is also a reminder of the horrors of October 7th. So, and then if we do have Hamas still in control in Gaza, that's such a staggering psychological damage to Israelis.
Well, President Trump has suggested relocating Gazans from Gaza to neighboring Arab countries. Both Jordan and Egypt have said no to that. The next meeting Trump is going to have is with the King of Jordan. So tell us, why are those countries saying no?
Well, it's history. And I think you mentioned it about a week ago, Gordon. Back in 1970, the Palestinian Liberation Organization, the precursor to the Palestinian Authority under Yasser Arafat, he tried to overthrow Jordan. They were forcibly removed. Then they went to Lebanon, where they regrouped, and then they attacked Israeli communities in northern Israel. That led to the Israeli invasion in 1982. So Jordan and Egypt, they really don't want Palestinians to come in that have been raised on the ideology of the Muslim Brotherhood, which actually founded Hamas, in their countries. And so they are saying they don't want to undermine the Palestinian cause, but it seems to go deeper than that. So as you said, this meeting with Jordanian King Abdullah, and also he's been talking to Egyptian President al-Sisi, those meetings are going to have a huge impact on Gaza and the region. And actually, we just heard there's a recent report, Israeli officials speaking to the Washington Post, that maybe Trump is interested in rebuilding Gaza through a regional deal with the UAE and Saudi Arabia, and that Netanyahu will not go against Trump. But we'll see how things develop in the next few hours and the next few days. Very pivotal meeting. Hard to overestimate how important this meeting is with Netanyahu and Trump.
What's your prediction for the meeting? What's your prediction for how the Trump administration and Israel will work together going forward? And in that, has Middle Eastern money, I read a report this morning about how much Qatar, some say Qatar, has put into American universities. I mean, the amount of money is absolutely staggering. It's like $2 billion. Have we become so intertwined economically that we can't fully support Israel at this point?
You know, the nefarious involvement of Qatar in universities, and not only universities, but also with, you know, perhaps members on both sides of the aisle, Democrats and Republicans, really is playing a pivotal role in what's happening. And Qatar, we've been told that if you say Qatar is Hamas and Hamas is Qatar, they're working hand in glove. Qatar is really sponsoring many of the radical groups throughout the region. And yet they're mediating between Israel and Hamas. And so many people are concerned about the role of Qatar and what influence they have on these negotiations, as well as you mentioned, so many of the universities and colleges in America right now. And I think it's becoming more and more evident and more exposed of what Qatar is actually doing, what their agenda really is in the Middle East and around the world.
Well, Chris, thanks for your insights. Thanks for being the watchman on the wall, and keep watching and keep informing us. We absolutely need to pray for this meeting today, and we need to pray for the peace of Israel.